Welcome to our Meet Our Icons podcast. My name is Ricky Santana for the Puerto Rico ICON Institute, and today I'm with my good friend Rodolfo Sánchez-Colberg from Parliament Capital. Rudy,
thank you
much
for
appreciated to
having
have you here. Thank you for sharing our facilities with us at the ICON Institute. Tell us what you do here.
So Parliament is a fund manager that focuses on providing loans to small businesses that are not getting financing from the traditional banks. That is something that we're seeing and that we have been seeing in Puerto Rico for many, many years. In 2005, there were 11 banks. Now we're down to 3 or 4. And the story repeats itself in the US as well. There's a lot of underserved communities across the states, primarily in Hispanic and minority communities, and that is our main focus.
And how big of a staff do you have here at Parliament?
Right now we're 15 full-time employees across the whole investment team and also operations. And we're here in Ciudadela, in Santurce. We love it, and it's a great place to be.
Santurce has become really interesting in the last 5 or 10 years. I think it's very, where it was 10 years and where it's now is significantly different. And I think what they did here in La Ciudad is creating that synergy between residents and business has been really great. What is in Parliament, like, what is your core business of what you do every day here?
So we meet with entrepreneurs and business owners that are trying to grow their companies. That is primarily our focus. We want to provide loans so that they can acquire competitors, merge with other companies, grow their products or services within the island and also outside of Puerto Rico, and so forth. So typically we're focused on growth-oriented opportunities, companies that already have a product, that already are providing services, that have revenue, but need that extra push from debt capital to get to where they want to be in the future.
And so how does that contrast like to a traditional bank? I'm looking to raise capital for my business. What is the difference between going to a bank and asking for money versus going to Parliament?
So typically, clients prefer coming to us than a bank. Number one, because of the speed of execution. So we can move very, very quickly. We have cash available to deploy because of the way we raise funds. We have a very streamlined process of how we identify deals that we want to pursue and those that we don't. So if there's a company that comes to us that needs financing and we just can't do the deal, we give them the feedback immediately so we don't make them lose time. So I think one of the key differentiators is that we can move quickly, and we are very open with them in terms of what we can do and cannot do in terms of financing. The banks have their own structure, they have capital constraints, they have regulatory constraints, and they typically take longer to give a loan. And another factor is that we are a bit more flexible in terms of the structure that we put together in our loans. We can be shorter term lenders, we can be interest only for a portion of the loan, and we like providing help or advice to our borrowers during that process. We are not that regulated as the bank, so there's no issue with us if a borrower needs advice for, let's say, how do I grow my business outside of Puerto Rico. Our staff and our partners, we have a ton of experience in that, and we are happy to share our thoughts.
So it's speed, flexibility, and that guidance.
And that guidance, we call it a partnership-oriented approach. We become partners. We're not investors in the company. We don't have equity in the company, but we want the company to succeed because eventually we want our loans to get paid off, right? So it's a win-win situation for all.
And as far as you guys do business outside of Puerto Rico, or strictly focused on the island?
Right now we're doing at least 60-65% of the loans in Puerto Rico, the rest across the US and the US Virgin Islands. Those are our 3 main territories. And within the US, we focus again on Hispanic and minority communities that are underserved. Most of them are in the East Coast, the ones that are growing the fastest. So it's great to be in San Juan and be able to just hop on a flight and be in 2 hours in Miami, 3 hours in Atlanta, and 3.5 hours in New York. So it's pretty easy for us to manage that.
When I reached out to you to just have this conversation, I think there was 2 particular things that were for my particular interest, and it was Act 185 and Puerto Rico source income. So I would like to again repeat your thoughts on how it works for the benefits of the audience that are not aware?
So Act 185, and which is now part of the Puerto Rico Incentives Code, Act 60, it was actually a key moment in time for our industry. Before November of 2014, when the Law 185 was enacted, there were not many private equity or private debt fund managers established on the island because the framework wasn't there. The infrastructure to build funds and asset management companies wasn't there. We were actually working on a fund in 2014 before the law was enacted, and the law basically fell on our lap as a godsend, and we were the first fund to operate under Act 185, and we're the largest Act 185 fund manager on the island. The Act established a few things that are critical to the fund management ecosystem in Puerto Rico. Number one, for the investors, it gives them a few tax advantages which are very powerful. One of them being that for every dollar they invest in a 185 fund, they get 60% back as a deduction on their tax liability. In addition to that, interest income and dividends generated by the fund are taxed at a flat 10% return rate. And it's not subject to any other tax like the alternative minimum tax or any other subsequent taxes that could be created in the future. So it is a true 10% flat tax. And in funds, for example, if the Act 185 fund is focused on equity as opposed to debt, if there are capital gains are tax-free under the decree of 185. So it's a very powerful tool for fund managers to sell their products, right? Because investors in Puerto Rico sometimes are looking to have ways to defend against the higher tax rates, and this is one alternative for them to.
So in that case, if I'm a local investor and I want to benefit from the Act 185 structure as a local resident, are there any minimum requirements as far as investment?
So it depends on the fund structure. There are, the law has a ton of requirements for the fund manager. We have to be registered investment advisors. We need to have certain amount of diversification. We have to have an advisory board with limited partner participation or investor participation, etc. But for the investor, it really depends on the structure and the strategy that the fund manager creates. The only if I'm not mistaken, the only requirement within the law for an investor is that they have to be an accredited investor.
Which means?
Which means that you have to have a net worth north of $1 million or make more than $200,000 per year for at least the last 2 or 3 years. After that, I don't think the law establishes any other particular requirements for the investor. That's the answer.
And in regards to Puerto Rico source income, and I know you've explained this to me a lot of times, so why not share with our audience and explain how it works?
Yeah, so that again has to do a lot with the structure of the fund, but the Law 185 funds are in Puerto Rico entities for the most part, right? So you're investing in a Puerto Rico asset that is exempt from the estate tax issues from the U.S. So they are, due to our relationship with the U.S., unique relationship with the U.S., we are looked as foreign. And that investment in a Puerto Rico LLC is shielded from estate taxes. But on top of that, since the majority of the lending that is happening is to Puerto Rico-based companies, the income generated by these loans are Puerto Rico source income. And that's really critical for other incentives out there, like the original Act 22 structure, where new residents of Puerto Rico under the Act wanted or benefited the most from their decree if the sourcing of the income was from Puerto Rico sources.
So it's an additional layer of incentives for a new resident?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this would immediately qualify for them as Puerto Rico source income. They would have the preferential tax rate that they have under the decree, which is even better than the 10% flat tax that we have under the Act 185. The law, and obviously we're not here to provide any tax advice or anything like that. We're just sharing a little bit of the information on the law, but The law has other restrictions as to how different incentives work, and obviously you cannot double dip, as we call it, right? But certainly, if you have a better rate than what the law affords, you can go for your improved rate with other incentives.
And just going back to the core essence of what Parliament is, what's on the radar for Parliament? What industries are you looking at, just to have a better understanding of what's in the future for Parliament?
So we are completely industry agnostic. We are open to investing in any type of business as long as it is cash flowing with positive EBITDA, with collateral, and in an industry that we feel is worth the risk reward, right? At the end, investing and what we do is all about, can we deploy our capital to get the return that we need for the risk that we're taking? And every industry has a different risk profile. So the way we look at loans is on a risk-based approach. So an industry that is highly linked to commodities or very volatile is something that we would probably either not do or price higher because of the potential risk of the underlying assets. But for example, a run-of-the-mill services company that has their commercial real estate where they operate, that provides either products or services to private industry in Puerto Rico, that would be something that is very attractive to us. We've done everything from agriculture to technology and telecommunications, right? So and everything in between. We have historically not done anything related to the government of Puerto Rico. Obviously, the government was passing through some fiscal issues, and we didn't feel that there was any price at which you could lend to entities that were getting the majority of their income from the government of Puerto Rico. But other than that, we are able to do everything.
Have you guys looked at, for instance, just out of curiosity, like cannabis? Is that an industry you will look at?
So cannabis is a great example of something that we want to do and that we want to support, but the framework for the management of cash is is a problem. At the end, all of our funds flow through the banking system, right? And until the banking system is able to accept cash from cannabis operations freely without the burdens or the risks that they currently could face if the regulator changed their mind, until we have that cloud eliminated, it's something that we cannot do. Some banks have actually told us, if you have $1 of cannabis revenue within your funds, that could put in peril your whole relationship and all of your accounts with us. So again, the risk versus the reward is not there from an operational point of view as well.
So I think in speaking to you and getting to understand what your company does, you've been really successful. And I know it's much more than you, and it's part of having a great staff. And this is it's in connection with what we're trying to do with ICON, and one of the reasons you're here. I want to understand, how have you managed your staff and the culture? Because I see a lot of the employees here, it's more like a family. They look very happy. You can feel that there's a different culture here. Can you just talk about how you have been able to approach?
So this has definitely been something that we've been very deliberate about, right? When what we do is very specialized. What we do, there's few people out there that actually do exactly what we do and how we do it, right? So every time we bring somebody in, they need to be well trained in terms of the technical aspects of it, but also in terms of how we want to manage the business, how we want our image, public image, to be. And you're right. The main approach that we've taken is that we are going to be a tight group. So we're only 15 people. 3 of us are partners, and 2 more that are very senior level managers, and the rest are the best that we can have in their different areas. That means that we're going to continue to be a very small, it's like almost like a SEAL, Navy SEAL team, right? Where we're very, very specialized, very focused, very well paid, and also trying to create an atmosphere that is as healthy for them as possible. We work hard, we play hard, we have flexibility in terms of hours, we have flexibility in terms of how many days they can be in the office and whatnot. We're here in Ciudadela, which is a great place to be, and not the traditional business districts where we have been in the past. So we try to do things a little bit different. This is our dress code for the most part, and those little things add up.
They do matter.
Yeah.
So now I think that, and one of the reasons for the podcast is for the audience to understand who are the movers and shakers in Puerto Rico, but more we have an understanding of what Parliament does, but I think it's important for people to see who are the faces behind Parliament. So in that case, I want to get to, for instance, you have a computer engineering background, so you're in finance now. So like, what happened there? What brought you here?
Life happened. So yeah, just to clarify, my computer engineering background lasted 3 years, and then I decided to shift to computer science and management. And this is a very long story, and I'm going to try to keep it short. But I was in Colegio Mayagüez studying electrical engineering. During that process, my parents were launching a store in Old San Juan to sell, basically a gift shop right in front of the cruise ships. And they were starting to sell sundries and other convenience items to the hotel next door and to the cruise ship passengers. And after a year in Mayagüez, they asked me to come back to San Juan. I think it had a little bit to do with how much I was partying as well in Mayagüez, but
I've heard stories.
But in addition to that, they wanted me to help in the family business. My family, this was I'm the youngest of 6 brothers and sisters. My family had been a very traditional family for many years. Entrepreneurship was not something that my dad was a banker and a finance person at construction companies, is that person, because they're both alive, thank God. And my mom had been, in my view, a stay-at-home mom, taking care of 6 children, right? So when I was going off to college, as the last one, they decided to build this business. Immediately I said yes. 25 years later, I'm not sure I had a choice, but yes, I made the move back to San Juan, and I started working as a cashier at the store that was called Paseo Sundries. I kept on studying computer engineering and electrical engineering at the Polytechnic University here, but I really fell in love with management, managing people, developing my people skills, connecting with my clients, and having a more personal relationship in business rather than the very technical work that I was learning and that I was going to do if I stayed the engineering track. So about 3.5 years into engineering, I decided that it was time to move to business. Thankfully, I had most of my classes were on computer science related degrees, so I was able to still graduate on time, and my background is in computer science and management. My first job was at a bank. It was October of 2001, so 1 month after 9/11, or a couple of weeks after 9/11. I took the first job that they gave me, and it was at First Bank, actually right across here in Ciudadela, in Santurce. And I was an analyst, using my technical skills to solve business problems at the retail side of the bank. And that slowly, that continued to show me that there was a lot more on the business side that I could add value than on the technical side. After 3 years, I went into the risk management group, now on the credit side, and became the vice president of risk management for all consumer portfolios. That was about $5 billion in consumer loans, automobile loans, boats and mortgages. And it was just a fantastic experience. But I was 26 years old at the time, and I knew that I was going to either be the president of the bank at some point, or I had to do something else. And that's where the entrepreneurial bug came back. I remembered the times that I was working with my parents in the store in Old San Juan, and everything started to fall in place as to whether I want to be an employee or an entrepreneur.
So changing that mindset, which it's not easy for some people are born with it, some fall into it, and some transition into it. In your case, this is not your first rodeo. What drives Rudy Sanchez as an entrepreneur?
So entrepreneurship, there's many drivers to entrepreneurship. In my case, I really wanted to have the ability to create value, to create wealth for me, wealth for my family, but also value to the ecosystem and to the communities around me. So the main impact that I wanted to create was, well, if I'm gonna be working 12, 14 hours a day, what benefits am I gonna get out of them, of that hard work? So for me, and it sounds very simple, but I mean, money was a big driver, right? I think wealth creation is very important to move things forward in society. Not to spend money, but to continue to promote a lot of programs and the like. On top of that, I loved solving problems. That comes from the engineering background, right? That comes from identifying things that are not working correctly and how to fix them. I always thought of myself as a good problem solver, so I decided that at that time, the opportunity arose that I could join a fellow entrepreneur called Nicolas Cohen in a company to acquire distressed loans, because the banks were having issues with their mortgages starting in 2005. Doral and First Bank and all of them have restatements, and the banking system in Puerto Rico started to have issues. So there was an opportunity to provide liquidity to the banking sector and to solve that issue, and also build a good business on our end, right? And that's what happened. In 2016, we launched our company, Operating Partners, and we didn't know that the global financial crisis was coming. It was a lot of luck in the process, but we ended up buying $3.3 billion worth of bad loans over 8 years, and we ended up selling the company in 2014 to a public company out of California. So I jumped to the end, but the driver was solving problems, creating value, creating wealth, and frankly having control over your life, right? It's important to feel that you're maximizing the time that you're spending doing what you want to do.
I was having this conversation with my daughter the other day, speaking of your engineering background, and like for instance, Jose Feliciano from Clear Lake Capital, engineer, and I've seen a lot of my clients and friends that are in finance or investment that are engineers. Is there something to that correlation? Because I studied market and finance, so I don't know if I should have started engineer and that. So what's with engineering?
So I mean, this is obviously a biased answer because coming from that background. But I think engineering gives you a very strong base in terms of problem solving, risk management, and just data-driven decisions. Right at the end, finance is a behavioral science. Right, it is. Things happen because markets are moving one way or people's sentiment is moving one way, and you have the opportunity to invest in different points of that behavior. So I think when you have somebody that is very good at gathering data, analyzing data, and identifying potential scenarios of what that data is going to do in the future, you have a very strong, that translates into a very strong financial view. You can create your thesis, your investment strategy in a very, very data-driven way, as opposed to a more macro or kind of fluffy way of creating the strategy. So I think typically deep thinking, data-driven, solving problems, so identifying what the market needs and what you can create in terms of an investment product to fix that problem. Those are the things that make engineers typically better at, or good at finance. They're not better or worse, there's very good engineers that are finance guys. The same could be said for people that study arts or history, or I mean, it's just different ways of.
I think Orlando studied was it political science?
I think it was Princeton and political science. So there's an argument that people that study like the old problems and the old philosophers and all that, they could be very good investors because they're very tied to how people think, and again, the behavior of the consumer or the behavior of the business owner is key to whatever we do in finance. So I don't think one is better than the other. I just think that in this day and age, with algorithms, with very fast decision making, and basically the data gives you, or the information gives you the advantage. The ones that can gather data more efficiently, that can gather the best data faster, are typically going to be better at making investment decisions.
And I think one of the takeaways I take from the conversation we're having is that for young students that are still figuring out what is that career path, it's not a linear path. And I was having this conversation with Jacobo Ortiz the other day, and it was like, we need to stress that when you're going out of high school and into college, it's trying to figure out what's your passion in life. Engineer end up in finance, and it's trying to understand what makes you happy, what makes you whole, and so regardless of where you start, is figuring out what's your passion, and just figuring out what's the correct path to that journey.
Yeah, and to add to that, Ricky, I mean, there's college. It's 4 years of learning as much of what you can in that period, right? But also learning about yourself in the process. But for example, one of the best classes that I took while I was in college was psychology. I took two courses of psychology in Maya West, and it was fantastic. And it actually helps me a lot now as a business owner, as a underwriting transactions. It helps me think or understand what the other person sitting across the desk from me is trying to accomplish, right? And you wouldn't think of that. I took them as an elective because I thought it would be fun, and it ended up being one of the best classes that I took. And psychology has a strong business relationship, so it's really weird. I don't think there is like you said, a cookie cutter approach as to what you have to study as a young individual to do something in the future. If you're going to be building rockets to space, you better be good at building rockets to space, and you should study physics and engineering and all that. If you're going to do business management, dealing with people, marketing, events, whatever you're trying to do, soft skills are very important. You don't necessarily learn soft skills in college. And yeah, you always have to have a good background.
So trying to understand again what drives you, what interests you. There's a fun fact about it that I think you wanted to become a foreigner. That's something in your life that interests you. Just help the audience understand your passion for agriculture.
So there's two fun facts there, and I was I don't think I shared this with you in the past, but I first wanted to be a marine biologist.
That one you didn't tell me.
So I'm passionate about the ocean. I'm passionate about scuba diving, surfing, sailing. I've always been in the water. And actually I spent quite a lot of time learning about sharks and fish and tropical coastal systems and all that before I went to college. I think the greedy side of me decided that marine biology wasn't going to be a place to actually create wealth. So I went into engineering because I love science generally. But for example, my recent passion project has been two things. Number one, supporting entrepreneurs that are building great businesses through either mentorship or through investments. And the other thing, which coincides with that, is I met a great entrepreneur in the agricultural space in Puerto Rico, and I decided that I was going to invest with them, but also help them build a top-notch ecological organic farming operation in Puerto Rico. They're now based in Rio Grande. It's called Hidroorgánica Finca Neo Jivairo. My partner Francisco and Maribel, my other partner, great talent, great, just smart, very, very smart people, super passionate about helping change the topic here about that we need to import everything, and that Puerto Rico, you cannot grow many things.
It's food security.
The food security issue. The fact is that we've been growing a ton of stuff within hydroponic systems, in the ground, in-ground systems that people historically said that you couldn't grow in Rio Grande, for example, because it was too warm, it was too shallow, it was too wet, whatever. And now we've proven that we can, and we have a great operation there. In addition to the fact that we have in Hidroorgánica, we have tours that we can.
So it's more of an experience.
It's both. It's a full-blown farm, but also mixed in with the tourism side, so ecotourism side. We have a glamping site on the property that overlooks the river. We have tours where you can actually basically grab your vegetables off of the.
So it's more like a farm, like a farmer's market.
It's an open farm or an eco-farm, ecotourism farm. But you can stay there. You can also do events there. There's a mariposarium where we have the butterfly breeding room, and within that butterfly room, as we call it, there's a place for 12 people to sit down and have dinner. And we've had many chefs provide culinary experiences with the ingredients that we grow in the farm. And it's just great. And it's a way, and I credit my partners 100% with this, it's a great way to solve what has been one of the largest problems in agriculture that I see, is that people are focused on growing one thing and getting pennies on the dollar or pennies on the pound for what they do, and it's very hard work. And whenever we have droughts, whenever we have hurricanes, whenever we have some crisis to the system, they basically go bust, right? Or they need to start from zero. By diversifying the offering that we have at the farm, and this is pure business 101, right? By diversifying what we do at the farm, so when the revenue from the agriculture side goes down, we always have the tourism aspect of it. We also have an educational component where we bring people from university, also from schools and universities and camps to learn about agriculture and so forth. So it's not only extremely cool, but also a very smart way to work within the agriculture space.
Are you looking to scale that business in that current footprint, or actually maybe replicate it in other parts of Puerto Rico?
Yeah, for example, we have a seven acre spot there in Rio Grande. I think we're using like 2.5 acres. So we have another 5 acres to deploy, and we're actively looking to grow there. My partners have gotten reach outs from other farmers that they want to do collaborations in other parts of the island with other crops. We're talking about cacao, we're talking about tobacco, we're talking about crops that cannot necessarily be produced in lower lying areas. So yeah, the opportunity, I think the numbers were 90+% of import for Puerto Rico in terms of produce. It has improved dramatically over the last 5 and you can ask Alex Borsho or
we're having a podcast with Alex and we're having that discussion. So that's like kind of a preview of our next podcast.
So Alex can talk a lot about this and Alberto, but the reality is, even though what we're doing now is probably 100 times more than what was happening before Maria and other recent events, it's just a dent, right? We're maybe we now at 85% imports from 90, but it hasn't. There's so much to do there. And this is fresh, healthy, typically ecological or organic food that takes one day to go from the harvest to the supermarket, as opposed to weeks in a container coming from California and then a boat to get to San Juan.
So I'm going to change a bit the conversation, because we took some time to talk about Parliament and yourself, but as a Puerto Rican, and we've had this conversation a lot since you participated in our first ICON, is what are your thoughts of the landscape of what is happening in Puerto Rico? I think in Santurce and Ciudadela, we have seen the transition where maybe 10 years ago, Puerto Rico was on one path, and I'm very biased, and probably yourself as far that we see more positive than negative. Just have a conversation of what you're seeing as a local, as an entrepreneur. Am I being too optimistic? It's a changing, because I mean, sometimes I think I'm just too optimistic, but what I'm seeing significant changes as far as job opportunities, different sectors thriving. So I just want to get your feeling from your perspective, what you're seeing.
So absolutely, and I am an optimist. So that is perhaps we're too optimistic talking to each other. But through the last, since I started my career in 2001, post 9/11, and then in 2005 the local banking crisis, 2008 the global financial crisis, then the hurricanes, then Zika. Then Puerto Rico has been under the government shutdown and fiscal problems. Puerto Rico hasn't had a good economic period for a long time, right? And still, we've been able to build a couple of successful businesses. I know of many people that have been able to build successful businesses, people that have moved their businesses to Puerto Rico or created departments here in Puerto Rico, like Bread Ventures across the street and others. So in spite of all the challenges that Puerto Rico has had for the last 20 years, this sounds cliche, but the resiliency of the local entrepreneur and the local business person is significant. It's incredible. And finally, I think, and a lot of things have to do with this. Finally, the magnitude of the work that has been going on for 20 plus years in building the entrepreneurial ecosystem, in nurturing those local companies that had the opportunity to grow, in building spaces that were friendly for business owners and employees to operate in. We're just starting to see the results of that. The fiscal problems are now gone, right? So the government is coming out of bankruptcy. That's great. So one less thing to worry about. But even when the government was bankrupt, the economy was still humming along. The private economy was still humming along pretty well.
It's two different Puerto Ricos.
It's completely different Puerto Ricos, but unfortunately, foreign investment looks at the fiscal side first and then decides to. So I think we were hurting, and we were doing everything homegrown, and obviously Act 60 or 2022 helped bring in an influx of investors and new residents. They helped move the real estate market. They helped clear some of the traffic jams, if you will, that we had in the economy in terms of asset classes. But that's not it. That's not all. We had I think we have a long way to go, but we're in the right track. There's a lot of funds finally flowing to Puerto Rico. There's going to be investments in infrastructure. There's going to be investments in real estate. NGOs are getting money from FEMA and from Course 3. So it's a much broader, I think things are going to start accelerating very quickly.
And I think to your point, one of the things that I've been seeing, there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes as far from the private sector, but then we have the public sector with the issues, and I think that narrative that there were two different Puerto Ricos going in parallel universes, and I think now with the fiscal problem solved, I think it's more for the private sector that has an opportunity to talk more about what's happening and other issues of Puerto Rico. So I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah.
That the people that are like down the rabbit hole, understanding and trying to create new business opportunities for Puerto Rico, it's finding that, and I think for investors or for maybe new residents, it's trying to understand what is the real Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see more of the private sector now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think starting a business in Puerto Rico is still hard. It shouldn't be that hard, but it is still hard, and a lot of that has to do with the government, the permitting process, how to get water, power into your business, yada yada yada. I know there's a lot of stuff going on to fix that, but still you're seeing a lot more businesses being created every day. So in spite of the challenges, people still want to build businesses here. They still want to work here. They want to move back from the U.S. and contribute to the island. So I think that those are all very, very positive markers that we're seeing in the economy. The government still has a lot to do for private industry. We're not going to talk about that now, but we're definitely in a better position in terms of the story that we can tell about Puerto Rico than what we were even 1 year ago.
So I know we can go forever having this conversation of what's happening in Puerto Rico, what's next, but I want to continue this conversation for our ICON conference. So Rudy, thank you for your time, thank you for your facilities, and to our audience, thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for more podcasts.
Thank you.